Welcome to the Week in Nintendo at Good Vibes Gaming. I'm Brandon Miracle, and I'm joined, as always, by Steve Bowling.
Hi, I'm glad to be here.
So this is our Nintendo news podcast. That said, there hasn't been a whole lot of major Nintendo news. There have been couple things here. We've got some sales data from Nintendo, as well as the unfortunate fate of the Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games series. But before we get into news topics like that, Steve, I want to ask you what you've been playing.
Well, I alluded to it a couple of weeks ago. I think 2 episodes back, I mentioned that I was playing a game that I couldn't talk about. And now embargo has lifted and the game is out, so I can. I've been playing Thank Goodness You're Here, which, if you're unaware, it's an indie. And it's made by the folks who published Untitled Goose Games. It's made by, I think it's called like Cole Supper. But they basically made this game that doesn't feel like a game. And I mean that like in a really good way, a very complimentary way. It feels like you're playing like an Adult Swim cartoon, like something that's just kind of out of left field and a little bit off. You know, it's presented in a way that kind of makes you question if you're really playing a game. And it's very well suited to the Switch because, you know, it's not like a visual showcase. There's nothing like crazy going on under the hood, but it feels like something that shouldn't exist. It's super British. It's like a fun, crazy cartoon. You play like this tiny little yellow man. And it's called Thank Goodness You're Here because every time you show up, that's what somebody says to you. And they set you on some kind of task that borders on the insane. Like just to kind of, if I say too much about it, I'll spoil some of the game's best moments because they're all just these really funny jokes that land really well. But one of my favorites is there's this part where you're asked to mow some grass. And when you pick up the lawnmower, it immediately cuts to like a shot of 2 cartoon flowers professing their love to one another. And you're like in the background and there's no direction given to you on what to do whatsoever. There's no controls. It doesn't tell you like, you know, go this way, go that way. But you slowly suss out that you got to go right until you're out of frame and then left and right and left. And of course, as these 2 flowers are like telling each other how much they love one another, you invariably end up mowing one of them down. and the second one like just starts screaming in agony. And then it immediately like pans right to reveal a 3rd flower. And the flower that just lost its lover starts professing its love for the next closest flower. And it's just like full of weird little bits like that. And it gets crazier and crazier as you play. But it's one of those games that like, you just have to play it to believe it. It's nuts and it's just charming in its own like super, super weird way. But I've had a lot of fun with it. I've played through it like 4 times already.
I actually picked this up myself. It had a launch sale that I think is still going on, and I had some gold coins, so I just picked it up. And I did experience the lawnmower scene that you're talking about. And I kid you not, I think I sat there for a minute just watching them say, I love you to one another because, like you said, it doesn't prompt you. So I just waited for something to happen.
Yeah, and then you realize you're the thing that's supposed to happen to them.
And they repeat that joke repeatedly throughout the game where like nothing will happen until you press a button. Like oftentimes when the man enters a scene, he just like gets spit out of something and he just like face plants into the ground and won't move until you jump.
Yeah. I love how they reintroduce your character into scenes. Like, you know, there's a bit where you get washed down the drain at a pub, like you jump into the sink and then you travel through the pipes and you see the pipes like go under a person's house. And like, you know, you end up eventually like each time you go through it, you get this like plate that is obviously supposed to be Princess Diana a little closer to falling off a shelf and shattering until you do. And then like someone comes in and gets really angry about it. It's just full of like these weird little gags. And it's such a charming, like weird ass game. It came out of nowhere, and I initially picked it up because it had Matt Berry in it, and I think he's hilarious. But the whole voice cast in this game is just the performances are so comedic and so funny.
As a budding like voice actor myself, this is exactly the kind of thing that I'd love to have in my resume because it's just you can tell that the people who performed for this game were just having the time of their lives. I don't know how much of it is improv. I bet you there is some improv in there.
Oh, there's absolutely some. For me in particular, it was funny because Matt Berry, his character, He has a conflict with a guy named Roger, which is my partner's dad's name. And my partner is British. So it's just like I've got all these clips saved in my Switch now of like Matt Berry telling Roger he has an ugly head and stuff like that.
There's a lot of like hating on people in this game. You'll like see stuff written on walls hating on people. I assume some of these names are names of developers, which is super funny. Yeah, I'm glad you brought this game up because I'm only like maybe an hour and a half, but I'm loving it so far. It is so funny.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think it's going to be one of those games that is very critically acclaimed. The reviews I've seen have all been really positive on it, but it needs that boost of word of mouth to kind of get it out there in front of people because it's absolutely like there's no other game on the Switch or PS5 or anything in the current generation that's quite like it, and it's worth your time to pick up because it's a short little game. It's like 4 or 5 hours, but they're some of the funniest hours I've had playing a game in well over a decade.
That's awesome. It's nice to have such a compact like experience, but something compact that's also like really compelling.
Yeah, and it's nice to have a game that's funny, like legitimately funny. Games are so often afraid to just be humorous.
Yeah, there was a scene I experienced with a guy with a garden hose that went a lot further than I ever expected in a game I was playing on my Switch. But it made me laugh. Made me laugh a lot.
I know exactly the scene you're talking about.
They were towing a line with that one. But yeah, the game is great. Definitely pick it up if you haven't. It also plays great on Switch. I did notice that if you pause, sometimes it takes a little bit for the game to come back, but the moment-to-moment gameplay, it's basically perfect.
Yeah, and I have to say I love how when you pause, if you're not British, you just get options that make no sense. Like one of them is faff. And I don't remember the other one, but it's like I looked at the language options in it, and under English they had like 3 different kinds of English. I left it on the default because I thought it was funny, but yeah, it's definitely it's just a very unapologetically British game.
So for games that I've been playing, it's tough because I haven't been playing a lot of like full games. But one game that stands out in my mind that I've been playing is actually just a demo. And it's Natsumon, 20th Century Summer Kid.
Okay.
It's a demo on Switch. I don't know if it's available on other platforms, but basically you live the life of a child on summer vacation in Japan in like 1998, I think.
Oh, that's rad. I haven't seen this.
It's fully voiced, all in Japanese. It has a very, very pretty, like cel-shaded art style, but it also mixes 3D art with 2D. So a lot of the environments will be like 2D hand-drawn, but they blend together incredibly well. It's a very convincing look. But basically, you're on this island that is about to have a festival or a circus, I think. And you can run around, talk to people, catch bugs, go fishing, climb stuff. The game just asks you to be a kid, and document those moments. I have never really played a game like this, but it's incredibly relaxing. You have like a limited amount of time each day in a similar way to like Animal Crossing or Stardew Valley. More like Stardew Valley, where once bedtime comes, you go to bed, and then the next day starts. And I believe the game takes place over the month of August. So once the end of August happens, the game is over, as I understand it.
Interesting.
I'm not for sure yet, but it's really cute. The game does exactly what it says it's doing. You were just experiencing the life of a Japanese child in the summertime, and it's really quaint and cute and very relaxing. I could see myself playing this, in the evening time before bed and just cozying up with my Switch. Definitely that kind of vibe.
Nice. I'm gonna have to check that out. I've not. This is the first I'm hearing of it. I know you mentioned it in our Discord, but I just haven't had a chance to dig into the game, but it sounds like something I'd love.
I think you would. I know how much you loved Animal Crossing New Horizons when it came out, and this is going to scratch that itch to some degree.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's just the way I framed it or the way I phrased it in our Discord chat is I called it delightful, and I still stand by that. It's just a delightful game. It'll make you feel good, and the one thing that surprised me too is like there's a full map that you can experience, like full 3D environments. You can climb trees. It has like Breath of the Wild stamina. And you can increase your stamina by doing activities. So eventually you'll be able to climb taller and taller things. Like right now,
Nice.
I can't actually climb to the top of a tree, but the game's daring me to. It wants me to do that eventually. So if you crave games that just kind of let you be, for lack of a better term, then try out Natsumon, 20th Century Summer Kid. Very cool.
I'm in. That was a great pitch. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a sleeper hit. At least I hope it is. In a similar way to Thank Goodness You're Here, this might be a game that slides under the radar, but I hope it doesn't.
Yeah, I feel like we're in kind of that era of the Switch where a lot of games that are coming out now might end up being kind of lesser known hits, outside of your big ones, like your Zeldas and stuff like that are still coming. Because people are kind of in a holding pattern, right? Like the other day, my daughter showed me a Switch dock that was like a piranha plant. And I think like 3 years ago, I would have been like, yeah, I want that. But now I'm just like, I don't want to invest stuff into the current Switch because I know that within a year, I'm going to be replacing all that with Switch 2 stuff, presuming that none of the existing Switch hardware will work, save for, I don't think there's a world in which they get rid of Joy-Con completely, but everything else, I imagine Nintendo's going to have a newer, better version of that I'm going to need to get.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I have an example of my own. My friend Logan, who did the little piano ditty that you'll hear at the beginning of these episodes, he still has his launch day Switch, and as I understand it, it is barely hanging on. But he has not gone out and gotten an OLED yet, just because of the looming threat, I guess, of a Switch 2.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a really interesting time to be a potential Switch purchaser, right? I know 2 years ago, my best friend lost his Switch OLED on a plane, and he just was like, "I'm not buying another one. I'm waiting." And he has, true to his word. It's been 2 years, and he hasn't purchased a new Switch. And I find that a lot of folks seem to be in that pattern, and I find that Nintendo is maybe surprised because I see on Twitter today, Nintendo announced their financial results for the most recent quarter, and people are just saying like, how is Nintendo going to sell 10 million more Switches this year? Like, what do they know that we don't? Because I think Switch sales are down. I want to say 46% year over year.
You might be right about that. I have a different metric here. Their overall profit is down 71%. Year over year. But yeah, they are experiencing a bit of a lull right now. I think it's clear that the Switch is finally sunsetting from a sales perspective, or at least beginning to do that. You still have games like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe selling 62.9 million units. That's just a stupid number at this point. It's just stupid. I love that for them, but it's stupid.
It's absurd, right?
Yeah, it is. And, Switch itself is at 143 million. It's starting to be uncertain, I think, if they're even going to hit that 153, like you said, or 155 or whatever it is.
I think that they do. And I think that they do not within this fiscal year. Absolutely not. I think that Nintendo maybe was a bit overzealous. And I think they know that because obviously we know that they've publicly acknowledged that there's a successor coming, which no duh, everybody knows that. But the minute they start publicly talking about it, that's kind of an admission in itself, right? That, hey, we know, like it's time to move on. And so it's long been time to move on. You can see that the sales are trending down. And I've said this for a long time on the previous iteration on this show, and anytime I get the opportunity to, that Nintendo's just sold a Switch to everybody who wants one at this point. Like, there's not a lot of people left who wanted one and didn't jump in over the last 8 years. You've had a long time to make that choice. And at this point, I think you just have a lot of people who, if they haven't jumped in yet, they're just assuming that that they can play those games on whatever comes next, and they'll just buy that. But I do think that over time, because I don't think, the Switch One goes away. I think that
No.
it gets slashed in price, and you have this newer Switch that's better at the price point that the current Switch is at, or maybe a little bit higher. So I still think in those first like 2 years that the Switch 2 is on the market, or whatever they call it, that you still get knock-on sales to the Switch 1, just because people are like, oh, well, I can still pick this one up because I can't afford the better one right now, and I'll upgrade later.
Yeah, I mean, they had the 3DS, living throughout the Switch's life for, a couple of years. And the story there is a little bit different. Nintendo was still having to sell the whole unified hybrid console concept. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it just makes sense for them to keep the current Switch around for a couple of years just as a cheaper option. Just because a Switch 2 comes out does not mean there aren't consumers out there that will still opt to buy a Switch 1. It's still going to be something I think that is good to buy for your kids. Maybe you have a premium Switch 2 at home that lives on the dock, and then the current Switch maybe takes a more Switch Lite kind of position in the household, where that's the one that you take with you. That's the one your kids can break without getting in too much trouble.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I know personally, that I will likely hand down mine to my kids when the Switch 2 comes out. And I mean, they have their own Switches, but they're on like launch models, so they might get my OLED when the Switch 2 comes out. But yeah, you position the Switch at like a lower price, right? The full featured Switch, or maybe you ditch the full featured Switch and the Lite is just the thing you go with. You drop it to like $99, and then you have this entry into this system with an incredible library for $100. And I could see that moving a ton of units, maybe 10 million more. I don't know, but I think if you consider the fact that there's likely 2 to 3 more years left in this original Switch's lifespan, that surpassing the PS2 is probably pretty easy for them to do.
Yeah, I just think back to the 2DS and the 2DS XL. That was, I think it was what, $80, $100.
It was something really low, yeah.
And it often came with a pack-in game, I'm pretty sure, like Mario Kart 7 or something.
I already see them bundling this one with Mario Kart 8. You bring up an interesting idea too. What if they release a new Switch, like a new, cheaper iteration of the current Switch, like something that is somewhere between a Lite and the lower end model, and it's $100 or something. Something really low, comes with a game, easy choice for people with younger kids that don't want to shell out $350 or $400 for whatever the latest and greatest is. I could see that moving a lot.
Yeah, I think there's still potential for something like that. I think the 2DS ended up being a kind of unexpected success for Nintendo in its various iterations. Yeah, I could see them doing that. I don't exactly know what form factor it might take. I think detachable Joy-Cons would probably still be part of the conversation there. Maybe something a little more sturdy, something that your kids can drop and you don't have to worry about as much. Nintendo released the Wii Mini without online capability or GameCube support. I don't remember what the response was to it or even how many units it pushed, but they've done this before, so who says they won't do it again?
I mean, I think you're right about the removable Joy-Con. I think that that's a core part of the Switch experience. I think that people, if you replace the current 3 Switches that we have with just one, then you have to have it have all the capabilities, right? It gets a little iffier for me if the Switch 2, assuming the Switch 2 is a hybrid console and has a dock. It gets a little iffier for me if you want to have a dockable Switch when you're also selling a different Switch with an incompatible dock. Because I think Nintendo, at least in America, has always been shy about confusing consumers. So I don't know that they'd necessarily want 2 dockable products if the docks are not interchangeable. Like if you can't put a Switch 2 on a Switch 1 and vice versa.
Yeah, that's
Because I
that's the tough thing because the current dock or the launch switch dock and even the OLED dock are not technically the same thing, right? Isn't the OLED dock capable of 4K output?
The OLED dock is very technically capable of 4K output. Obviously, it's not something that is enabled in the firmware, but at the
Yeah.
chip level, like the chips that are in it could do it, but Nintendo has never enabled it. But aside from that, like they're still pretty similar technologically
Hmm.
speaking. Like obviously, you can put a switch, a launch switch in an OLED dock, and an OLED in a launch switch dock with no problem. Um, and I think for Nintendo to have two dockable products that are out there, you have to maintain some level of interoperability because people will get confused. Like, oh, hey, I bought the Switch 2, but my kid can't put her Switch in it. What the hell? You know?
They they could. It's tough to say. You know, they've had like their cartridges take different shape to prevent you from putting it in the wrong system in the past. I think that'll be the case here with the Switch 2 as well as if we're still sticking with cartridges, which I assume we are. Um, so maybe there's something about the Switch 2 form factor that means you just can't put it in a Switch 1 dock somehow for some reason.
Yeah, I mean that would make sense. It'd be smart. I just wonder how much Nintendo would want to go that route. I mean, we're deep into speculative territory here, but
Yeah.
uh yeah, I have to wonder because this is the same company, Nintendo of America specifically, that delayed and delayed and delayed the launch of the new 3DS, like the smaller one, because they didn't want people getting confused that there was a big and a small one. And so I wonder how they would approach like having two systems with two different types of docks on the market at the same time, knowing fully well that in some households, it's like there's one TV. And so,
Yeah.
and they're not going to want to take up two inputs for two different Nintendos on the same TV. So I'll be curious to see how that all works out. But I think that's going to be. I don't know, man. I keep wondering if how Nintendo will work the marketing. I think that's really the most important thing here. They nailed the marketing with the original Switch, and they just need to deliver a similarly strong message with the Switch 2 because Wii to Wii U was a disaster.
Yeah, you've brought up some interesting points here. Like, I think a lot of their difficulty is just going to come from compatibility and consumer understanding of what works with what and what doesn't work with what. Uh, I'm very hopeful that they can just get around a lot of those issues because we lived through the Wii U. We know that Ma and Pa aren't going to do enough research to figure this stuff out, and they shouldn't have to. I should clarify. Um, it's it will cause problems if not addressed.
Yeah, exactly. Nintendo needs to be really clear on how the Switch 2 differs from the original, where things overlap and where they diverge. And I hope that they are clear on that because with the Switch, they had kind of a layup, right? Like you went from a Wii U, this bulky console with this bulky second screen, to a completely portable device. That was an easy thing to communicate. Where when you go from one portable device to presumably another portable device, you have to communicate very clearly, like what is the line that separates these? Is it just 4K? Is it new controllers? Is it, and how much of this stuff works together still? Can you play the next Mario on the old Switch, or do you have to buy it separately for the old Switch? I sincerely hope that while I hope that they blur the generational line a little bit. Like if you buy digital, I want to be able to play it on either. If you buy
Yeah,
physical, I'm okay with it being a separate physical medium. But if I'm buying digital games, I want them to work across both.
it would be they'd be shooting themselves in the foot if that's not the case going into this next console cycle. Please, Nintendo. I know you like to Nintendo every once in a while, but this isn't one of those times.
Please don't Nintendo.
I'm really pleading here. Um, Another interesting thing has happened, and I have mixed feelings about it. I don't know where you land on this, but we have heard from the Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games executive producer that the series is dead.
I don't love this. And I'll be real. I'm not the biggest fan of the Mario and Sonic Olympic Games series. I think they're fun, but I don't like wait for one with bated breath every time they get announced. That being said, I'm more upset because of what they've chosen to prioritize over this.
Hmm.
Like and to be clear, this is the what would you call it? The games division of the IOC.
The Olympic Committee is what I
Yeah,
read.
the Olympic Committee has decided to do like NFTs and stuff like that
Yeah.
over an established partnership with freaking Sega and Nintendo, and it's sad because it's such a cultural touchstone in gaming history. Like Mario and Sonic at the Olympics was the first time they shared a screen space together, and actually, is it the only time? Like, have they done
If
anything with Mario and Sonic outside of those games?
Well, not if you don't count Smash Brothers.
Yeah, if you don't count Smash, which I feel like Smash, it's unfair to count as like a crossover,
Yeah.
just because it's the crossover's crossover. But yeah, so this is the closest we've gotten to like the dream of having like a platformer that they share, which has always been what I wanted, but this was the closest to it. And it was almost like having like a Mario Party with Sonic. And I'm sad that that is going away in pursuit of something way worse, like objectively
Yeah.
just way worse.
Yeah, it really sucks that this is why this is happening. I agree. I'm not really the biggest Mario and Sonic the Olympic Games fan, but I think there is something novel about having these games when Olympic season comes. My wife is big into watching the Olympics. She's been watching every day since it started this summer. And I think it'd be kind of fun, just to have a new, fresh game available that we could play when events are not happening or there's something that she's not interested in watching, just to keep the Olympic spirit going. I think there's value in that maybe isn't even being considered here.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. It is for me the most exciting thing about the Olympics. I'm not a big Olympics person either. I'm not big on sports in general, but I always looked at these games as like the key thing about them that was interesting. Like I might not be the biggest fan of them, but I've picked up and played all of them. So clearly there's something to them. And it just feels like such a short-sighted maneuver to kind of, reach the Olympic hype to a demographic of people who probably largely are not excited by the Olympics.
yeah, I mean, even the whole nature of the game is very in the spirit of the Olympics, where you have two competing franchises and in the real world competing countries coming together and crossing over in a way that they don't usually. Um, I know there are a lot of people that would rather Mario and Sonic cross over in a more meaningful way,
Yeah.
even as like you just said with platformers. Um, but still, we had an avenue for that here, and it's kind of sad to see that go. Like, I think Sonic should just get an invite to all of Mario's outings. Like, why isn't Sonic playable in Mario Party? Why isn't he in Mario Kart? Like, in some ways, it feels like he's kind of part of the team now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I mean, Mario and Sonic were long rivals, right? But now there's a whole generation of people who grew up without that uh, kind of playground battle between Mario and Sonic. Mario versus Sonic has not been a thing for so long. Now they're seen as kind of like friendly rivals as opposed to like bitter enemies. And I remember being a kid talking about like, oh, well, Super NES is cool because it's got Mario World, and other kids arguing because Genesis had, the Sonic series. And, but if you grew up in the last 20 plus years, uh, Mario and Sonic have been on the same consoles your entire life. Like they,
Hmm.
I remember picking up Sonic Adventure 2 DX for the GameCube and just being like, wow, what a moment. Like Sonic is on a Nintendo console. And ever since then, it's felt like he's just increasingly grown closer to Mario, like to the point that he's almost like a pseudo first party mascot at this point.
Yeah,
Because
that's how I feel about him.
he's so ingrained in like offshoot Mario stuff. He's been in more Smash games than any other third party character. He's been in all of these Olympic games with Mario. It would make sense. Like I don't think he'd be out of place in a Mario Kart or a Mario Party, and even not in like an actual Mario platformer. Like I would love for Sega to take a crack at Mario and Nintendo to take a crack at Sonic. That would be so cool.
Yeah, that's definitely something I'd love to see them do. Even going back to the Smash angle, you mentioned that he's been a third party character longer than anybody else. It's also worth noting that he's been in more Smash games than he hasn't been.
Yeah, that's true too.
um, yeah, I feel like Sonic should get a seat at the table at Mario's outings. There's another element of this story that I've been seeing on Twitter that I don't necessarily agree with. I've been seeing a lot of people saying, "Oh, that this door is closed. Now we can open the door to Mario and Sonic doing other things together." And I don't think this was ever a blocker for that. I don't know where people are coming from.
Yeah, that's not how contract negotiations work. I think if there was mutual interest on both sides, well, mutual interest means both sides, but if there was mutual interest, that this would have happened already. And I'm going to say something that's going to make some Sonic fans big mad.
Uh-oh.
I think if Sonic games were better, this would have happened. And I say this as somebody who loves Sonic. I say this coming from a place of love. Like, Sonic Team makes good games. Nintendo EAD makes genre-defining games. And I think that that's the huge difference. Like, in the 90s, they were on par with each other. Like,
Yeah.
I would put Sonic 3 up against Super Mario World in terms of, just how great they were as platformers. But the
Totally.
jump to 3D hurt Sonic way more than it hurt Mario. In that it didn't hurt Mario at all.
No, it didn't.
Whereas Sonic Team has struggled and continues to struggle. Like with Sonic in 3D. I am on record about not loving Frontiers. But Sonic Mania, that was a standout game in a year of standout games. So obviously Sega still got the sauce. They know what to do, but they don't execute consistently. And I think that's the fear. I don't think that Nintendo, I don't think that Sonic Team wants to hand Sonic over to Nintendo for fear that Nintendo could do better with their own character than they can. The last thing they need is, oh man, Nintendo made a Sonic game and it rocked,
Mhm.
And similarly, Nintendo doesn't want to hand over Mario to Sonic Team and then get a game that maybe doesn't represent what they love about Mario. Like they don't need a wand of Gamelon for the Mario series.
I think if a Mario and Sonic crossover platformer RPG, something to that effect, would be better handled by one of Nintendo's development teams exclusively. And this is not to, harp or be mean to anybody over on Sega's teams, but I think Nintendo just seeks a level of polish that's much higher, and they're much better about obtaining those results. But I agree with you that I think it would be kind of damaging for Sega if that were to happen.
Yeah, I think that it's one of those situations where it's just, okay, Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games is a set genre, where you just have this kind of like core gameplay that is easy, that, it's neither Mario nor Sonic. So it's okay because you're not misrepresenting either. And I think that that's where those two characters will probably live for a very long time. Unless Nintendo goes out and acquires Sega, this will pretty much be how it is. And I do wish Nintendo would acquire Sega. Like, I know that Atlas fans are probably wanting to kill me for saying that, but I would just love to have Mario and Sonic under the same first party umbrella. I would let Atlas still do their thing if I was Nintendo. Just go make PlayStation games. We're all good with that. But Sonic's going to be on Nintendo platforms from now on. Because I think it's high time for them to have something else. But I agree with you 100%. Like the Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games is probably just because, similarly, like a similar story from way back when that only old folks like me remember is Mortal Kombat versus DC Universe, where it didn't have fatalities because DC didn't want to show their superheroes killing people. And so it was like this tragic, like this game could have been great, but DC kneecapped it. They didn't let NetherRealm go all the way with it. So it became something that was not a good Mortal Kombat and not a good DC game. And I think that's what we'd end up with in a more traditional Mario Sonic mashup, because both companies would want to protect their brands to the point that it'd be a watered down version of both.
And while it didn't result in maybe the best game, like I can respect DC's choice in cases like you look at a character like Superman, and watching Superman punch somebody's brains out would
Right.
it doesn't sit right with me. But like, you know, I don't want to water down Mortal Kombat, but I also don't want Superman to do things that he doesn't do.
Right. Yeah. From when you look at it from the perspective of the folks involved, it makes sense, but then it just shouldn't have been a product in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So hopefully Mario and Sonic get to do something together at some point. Personally, I think the best case scenario for me would just be to have Sonic as a playable character in Mario Party, Mario Kart, and maybe some of the sports games. And not just Sonic. Bring Tails, Knuckles, and a couple of those characters over. There's no reason to keep them out, I don't think. Look at Mario Party Jamboree. I can play as a Goomba. Let me play as Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And it's another example of, a game where the genre is not a traditional Mario genre. So I think it'd be fine to put Sonic in that, and Sonic in Mario Kart would be amazing. Like I was initially spitballing the idea of like Smash Kart, but I'm like, you don't throw away a brand name like Mario Kart.
No.
Even if it includes every Nintendo character, it'll always be Mario Kart.
It's Mario Kart, yeah. Changing the name that's like career suicide.
Yeah.
But moving on, I think it's time to dig into our mailbag a little bit. Questions from our patrons in our winner's circle. And we've got some interesting ones today. There's one from Hendrix Trog asking, Nintendo makes a lot of merch for their games, but what is a Nintendo series that you feel deserves a larger merch presence than it currently has?
Oh my gosh, that is a really good question. And it varies by country because Nintendo is different across the pond. Whichever pond you're going across, they're very different. So I would have to go out and say, oh gosh, it's tough. I mean, because Nintendo products fall into like two tiers, right? Like your ones that always get stuff and your ones that never get stuff. And there's not really an in-between tier. So it's like you have Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, and then you have like everything else. Mm-hmm. But I'm gonna say I'm gonna do a weird one in honor of what's coming this month and say Famicom Detective Club. There's like no merch for that. I would pick up some merch.
I feel like anime girl figures, like that's a market right there. Ayumi Tachibana would look right at home on a shelf next to Madoka Magica or something.
Yeah, why not? I got a shelf back here. I'll put her up there.
That's an interesting pick. And yeah, I can't think of a single piece of Famicom Detective Club merchandise that I've ever seen. Not one.
Yeah, not even in Japan, where the games have existed for 40 years. There's nothing.
Yeah, that's an interesting pick. The one that came to mind for me right away is, it frustrates me to no end that these don't exist. Why is there not a line of Star Fox ships?
Oh my god, yeah. We only got the one with Starlink, but that wasn't made by Nintendo.
Yeah, I want, and like Gunpla's really big. I would love to buy an R-Wing model kit, a Great Fox model kit, Wolfen, all the various ships and enemies and bosses from Star Fox 64. This is merch that makes itself.
Yeah, that's true. I want to throw one more out there only because I have merch from it and there's not enough. ARMS. ARMS had one of the most stunning sets of character designs that Nintendo's done in a long time. And you could have made some fun. Like I would have bought some ARMS Rock'em Sock'em robots in a heartbeat.
Oh, me too. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I have a hoodie, and that's the only thing I have of ARMS.
The most that I've seen is I think they had like little keychains that were the fists, and they had like the noodle arms that would extend. I'd love to have some of those, but think about like what were those inflatable punchy toys? Soccer boppers?
Yeah, something. Rock'em Sock'em. No, I'm thinking Rock'em Sock'em robots again. That's just in my brain now.
I think it's soccer boppers.
Soccer boppers or something like that, yeah.
Imagine having that, but there's like a little button you press on the inside and it just pops out a little bit, gives you some of that extendo arm action.
Oh heck yeah. Or even if you gave me like an action figure of an arms character, and I could like, they had like the glove that shoots out projectiles, and you could like load it in their arm and then push their elbow and it like shoots them out. I'd love those goofy little things.
I'd love that. I could think, there's Helix, who's made out of goo.
Yeah.
What if there was just like what if there's just like a stretchy figure and you could like pull him and he would stretch out and throw him at a wall and he'd stick to it? I'd love that.
Yeah, and I mean, we only got the one amiibo, and that's only because Min Min was in Smash. So Nintendo didn't even do amiibos for that game at the height of the amiibo craze.
Didn't its comic series get canceled too?
I think so, yeah.
It was supposed to have like a graphic novel or something that ended up never happening. ARMS is one of Nintendo's greatest, like, I don't want to call it failures, just missed opportunities, maybe? Because there's such a rich universe there that they built that I actively love that we never get to dig into. If ARMS ever got a sequel, I'd love like a more fully featured story mode where we can dig into the characters a little bit, have some fun with it. But I have a hard time seeing it happen, and I'm sad about it.
Yeah, which is really weird to say about a game that sold north of, I know it was over 1 million.
It was.
Wasn't it? Was it a couple million or was it just one?
I mean, think it was just one. To
refer to 1 million seller as a failure, I mean, is a testament to how well the Switch has done, but also just, how high the bar is. It's a shame because I think Nintendo has lots of opportunities to both revive franchises and bring out merch for those franchises. And I don't think they realize in some cases just how ravenous Nintendo fans are for more obscure stuff from them.
I talked about model kits earlier. Xenoblade 2 has one model kit you can buy for one of the it's an end game thing, so I won't dig too deep into that, but like I look at Xenoblade 3, which has tons of like mechs and stuff in it. Like, why aren't you selling stuff like that? I would eat it up, and I'm sure millions of other Xenoblade fans would too, because they are a ravenous bunch.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how little, comparatively little, because Xenoblade does get merch, but compared to Zelda, Mario, Pokemon, the big three from Nintendo, it is a drip feed of stuff.
Yeah, and there's so much opportunity in different types of merch, and I feel like they don't cast as wide of a net as they could be. At least not here in the U.S. It's very different in Japan, like you mentioned.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that'll change when we get our own Nintendo World Store in California. I mean, we have the one in New York, but the various stores in Japan all carry different stuff. So it'd be nice to see if we get like a new selection of merch at the New York store when that opens next year.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. I have a background full of all kinds of stuff. I'd love to add to it with some more meaningful Nintendo merch. You see a lot of Mario and Sonic and Pokemon back there, but it doesn't spread too far outside that. Oh, Zelda too, of course.
Yeah.
But that's not our only mailbag question. We've got another one from, I think it's Tuxpeng. I hope I'm saying that right. What do you all think is the first party... Let me start over. What do you all think is the first party Nintendo game that has struck the best balance difficulty-wise? On the Switch alone, you've got some games that are widely considered challenging, relatively at least, in stuff like Metroid Dread and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, whereas other games are often criticized for being extremely easy, like Kirby Star Allies. Could be from any generation if you want.
Ooh, I'm gonna go back because it allows me to make a point. So one of the things is that with the quarterly results that we got from Nintendo this week, Breath of the Wild continues to outsell Tears of the Kingdom. Even if you take just like sales from this quarter, more copies of Breath of the Wild, an almost 8-year-old game, sold than Tears of the Kingdom, an only 3-year-old game. Or, oh gosh, is it 3? Whatever. But 2-year-old game. But
1-year-old game.
1-year-old game. My brain is not working. But
anyway, it's been 15 months.
15 months. That's right. You have a young kid at home. It makes more sense for you to live in the last year. But my point is though that I think Breath of the Wild was one of Nintendo's most perfectly balanced games, in that it started off incredibly difficult and got easier as you made your way through. And that sounds contrarian based on how games traditionally work. But given given like the narrative of Breath of the Wild, that you start out with nothing and you work your way up to becoming, restoring your memories, becoming fully equipped, getting the Master Sword, all that stuff, it makes sense that the game would become easier as you go along. And I liked that feeling of like those opening moments of Breath of the Wild where it's just like, oh God, I've got a stick and I've got to figure out how to take out a group of bokoblins over there. Those little guys who mean nothing in the later moments of the game are incredibly threatening. And God forbid, you run into a guardian or something else early on in the game. You better know how to parry and parry well if you want to survive. So it's just kind of, I've really appreciated the way Breath of the Wild did that. I think it's better than any other Nintendo game's difficulty curve, including Tears of the Kingdom, which I think Tears of the Kingdom is a bit too easy even from the onset, whereas Breath of the Wild, especially in Master Mode, is legitimately difficult when you start.
It's a shame, too, that Tears of the Kingdom never got its own Master Mode equivalent, and it just doesn't seem like that's ever going to happen.
Yeah, because my answer may be different if we had a Master Mode in Tears of the Kingdom. I have to believe that the Switch 2 is getting some type of patch for Tears of the Kingdom that will include something like a Master Mode.
It'd be a shame because until it does, it doesn't feel complete to me because of that. Interestingly, one of the one that came to mind for me is actually one of the games that they mentioned, and it's not necessarily from the perspective that you might think, but I was thinking of Metroid Dread. Metroid Dread's combat may not be the easiest from start to finish, especially towards the end. It can actually get quite brutal. But I was thinking about game difficulty in terms of navigation and exploration, because, it's a Metroid game, spawned a genre. Getting lost is kind of the name of the game, but Metroid Dread is very good at funneling the player where they need to go without holding your hand. Like a lot of unspoken context clues will lead you to where you need to go. Oftentimes I found myself just running in a direction in that game and finding myself where I needed to be. There's some I want to say there's some little bugs that will fly at certain doors that you're supposed to go through, and that's not even something I noticed when I played. But and the reason I bring this up is because I'm not particularly good at Metroidvanias in general. I have a hard time with navigation. It's very easy for me to get lost. Hollow Knight is a game I have famously been unable to get into because I just can't find my way around. And I know that's entirely a skill issue. So if you're a Hollow Knight fan listening to this, I want to be good at it. I'm just not. I'm sorry. But Metroid Dread made me feel good at the genre because I didn't, because of the way it led me without making me feel like it was doing that, if that makes sense.
No, it does. You and I are very similar in that regard. I played Super Metroid as a kid, and I spent forever trying to figure out how to beat it, and I got better at it through repetition, but I wouldn't call myself good at the genre of Metroidvanias. I have similar issues with Hollow Knight. I have never finished it, and I keep trying to, and whatever way they're signposting stuff in Hollow Knight does not work for me. It doesn't clue me into what I should be doing. And that's not a criticism of Team Cherry. That's a criticism of my cognitive abilities, if anything. Because I do think it's a great game. When I get to the places where I need to be, I have loads of fun, but I just have trouble getting around. But I did not have that issue with Dread, which, while again, I'm not criticizing Team Cherry, I am complimenting Mercury Steam because whatever they did worked for me. It helped me find my way through the game. I never felt like I was lost for too long. Anytime that I entered a room and I felt like there was no clear path forward, I felt like I definitely had the tools to figure it out. And that's not something I can say of many Metroidvanias.
Yeah, Metroid Dread is designed in a way that as long as you are moving, you will find where you need to go. And I really like that. It's especially impressive given that there are so many sections in the game where you're put under immense stress when you're being chased by those
Oof.
enemies, and you just have to move. You don't really know where you're going. You just need to go. But somehow they've built that game in a way where even in those moments where you're just running away, you still end up where you need to go. And
And
that's really impressive.
And those moments are really masterful, by the way, because I remember how elevated my heart rate would get when I was being chased by an Emmy. Like it would just make me nervous to be in those rooms, and I just wanted to get out. But somehow I would still get out on the right side of that room. Um, and the difficulty curve was so good because I remember playing the heck out of that game. And anytime an Emmy got a hold of me and I was able to actually counter it, it felt like such a momentous achievement for me to knock it out for a little bit. And I was like, yes, I got you. And then delivering the death blow to them was always, that was always nice.
Yeah, there's only a few times in that game, in the combat specifically, where I felt it got like tough. I'm not going to go into detail here, but the final boss was one that I had to spend a lot of time getting good at in order to beat.
Yeah.
But it wasn't one of those, like, I'm not a rager, so I don't get mad when I lose, but like it was not rage inducing. Like,
Yeah.
I wanted to keep trying.
I get what you mean. It wasn't unfair. It never felt like it was unfair. It felt like you just didn't understand it well enough yet. And, I remember at the time when I played the final boss battle, initially, being like, wow, this is hard. And thinking to myself, I was like, I need to dust off like the SNES center of my brain. Like, because when I was younger playing the Super Nintendo, I would often approach a boss and be like, what's his pattern? Let me just observe and figure out his attack patterns and then learn how to adjust to them. And that would be how I'd like get through games in the 8 and 16-bit eras. And I realized that with Dread, for the first time in a really long time, I needed to take that approach. I was like, oh, I need to, these days, I hate to say it, but it's like, it's more reaction time than anything else. Like reading bosses in more modern games is pretty easy if you have good reaction time. But with Dread, it was like, if you don't take time to learn what this boss is going to do and what their tell is for each move, you're dead.
Yeah. But it's one of those rare cases where, as you do it, it does feel good to conquer it. I remember I decided to fight the final boss again after I went and got every item just in case something changed. Because I didn't want to look it up. I just wanted to do it and just see.
Yeah.
And the second time I did the boss fight after beating it for the first time and collecting everything, I did it in one try and I didn't take damage. Like, that's how much I had learned just from facing it over and over again. So it was hard, but the game does a great job of teaching you.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a big fan, especially with how the industry is going of mergers and acquisitions, but Mercury Steam needs to be a Nintendo first party studio.
That's not a relationship they should let go of, because that team knows what they're doing.
Yeah, and I sincerely hope that the popularity of Dread, again, talking about franchises that are kind of, not given the amount of love they maybe deserve, though Metroid is not among those lately. It has been in the past. I hope that Nintendo realizes that there's room in the world for both 2D and 3D Metroid games.
Totally. I think that's the path we're headed in, thankfully, since we got Metroid Prime 4 on the way, and hopefully it is not the last. And I say the same thing as with Dread. I hope Metroid 5 is not the last. Even if this arc of the story is over, there's more stories to tell. So let's keep pumping them out.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And while we're on it, just please give us a new Star Fox, a new F-Zero too. Like, just any of those.
I am such a big Star Fox fan.
Me
and
too.
I am starving, man. I'm starving over here.
Yeah, we have not eaten for a while. And it seems like Nintendo likes to use this excuse. Maybe not an excuse, but they like to say, what do we need to do to revitalize this franchise? We haven't come up with an idea that's new or interesting enough. And I'm like, okay, F-Zero, I can kind of get when they say that. It's a racing game. How many different ways? I think there are obvious things you could do with F-Zero, but that aside, Star Fox is ripe with ideas. Like there's so many that you could do. Like it it'd take no more than 10 minutes on a whiteboard to come up with a concept for a new Star Fox game that does something the previous ones didn't.
I don't even need them to do anything that different. Like, it's been dormant for so long, that just something that maybe falls closer in line with Star Fox Assault and just giving us a couple of different ways of playing and just maybe slightly evolving on that, it would be good enough. I just want there to be a new game that's actually new. I don't want to play Star Fox 64 for the fourth time.
Yeah, that's kind of the shame of it all, right? It'd be nice to play a new Star Fox, like a brand new Star Fox. I'd take just about anything at this point. You're right. Like if they just revisited the old formula with new missions and new levels, I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, you iterate after that. And then I think we got time for one more question. Let me see if we got another one here. We've got an interesting one from Moao. I still don't know if I'm saying that right. This is like the second time.
I think it's Moawe.
Moawe?
I'm going to assume. I accept full responsibility for any mispronunciation there.
You heard it here first. It's Steve's fault, not mine. You guys should look at the best-selling first-party games for Switch and figure out how it got those sales numbers. So I think maybe we'll pick one or two and just figure out what happened. I think Mario Kart 8 Deluxe just kind of writes itself.
Yeah.
Mario Kart is Mario Kart. That's just kind of what happens.
Mario Kart is like the Kleenex of video games at this point. Like when people, you ask like 10 non-gamers to mention a video game, and it's going to be split almost evenly down the middle between Smash and Mario Kart.
Yeah. Might throw some Fortnites in there and Among Us, but like, if they were to say a Nintendo franchise, I think
it depends on your age group. Like
that too.
Because if you ask people my age, like 40s and above, it's Mario Kart is definitely in there. Mm-hmm. If you ask people 20 and under, yeah, I think you get more like Among Us, Fortnite, stuff like that.
Let's see. Another top title. This is a game that I know you love. Animal Crossing New Horizons, 45.85 million units.
That to me, so, you know, and I'll say this, I've said this for years now. What timing? Like what incredible launch timing. Obviously Nintendo had no way of knowing what was going to happen to the world when Animal Crossing came out. But it was a weird time. Like, and I think that the pandemic really helped Animal Crossing. Like it boosted those sales beyond belief because suddenly everybody had to be home and nobody knew what to do with all this newfound time that they had. You know, those of us that were already gamers, well, we knew what to do with that time. But a lot of new people came into the fold because they needed something to eat up the time they spent driving to work, going out to dinner, doing stuff like that they could no longer do. You know, when you're shut into your house, you find things to fill those gaps. And Animal Crossing just was kind of at this perfect time where people were already tremendously excited for it. And then the world blew up. And I'm not going to lie, like when I reviewed that game, I didn't realize like how much the pandemic impacted me till I was watching my final cut of the review. And I was like, I had a tear in my eye. I was like, man, the world sucks. So, you know, and I had comments from people saying like they watched the review and it made them tear up just thinking about like visiting friends and seeing people, you know, and this was a conduit for people to like see their parents, see their friends, you know, if they were isolating, this was their way to have a little bit of non-isolation. And so I think that was part of it. And I think the other part is it's just a damn good game. Like it's a really great game. You know, it offers something quite unlike any other experience on the Switch. It is the epitome of a cozy game. And I think that people appreciate that. Like you were talking about Natsumon at the top of the episode. There's a lot to be said about the stress of real life and of being an adult and of having a game where you can forget those things. Because I don't often want to go on quests and kill monsters when I'm already stressed out. I would prefer something more down tempo, quieter, relaxing. to take my mind off of all the bad stuff that exists in the real world. So I think it's just that it's a good escape game.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I saw it was interesting. I had people, in my circle who aren't even really Nintendo fans who were desperately trying to find a Switch when this game came out just because, you know, they just they needed the escape. Like they'd never played Animal Crossing before, but they saw a bunch of people playing Animal Crossing and getting together and having play dates, I guess, just in the game, and they wanted to be part of that. Um, Multiple people in my circle did that, which I always found very interesting. Also, you couldn't get a Switch during this time; it was impossible. They were sold out everywhere.
Yeah, I remember I wanted to do an unboxing of the Animal Crossing Switch. I had so much trouble finding it. I ended up going to a Walmart about 60 miles from my house to find one. And I picked it up and I brought it home. And this was one of the rare times that I went into a store during the pandemic because didn't really like the idea of doing that much back then.
Yeah,
And shelves were just bare. Like there were no Switches anywhere. And I started seeing on Reddit where people were just like, went to Target today, couldn't find a Switch, and it was like the Wii shortage of 2007 all over again.
hmm yeah. I mean, it was kind of sad. There was an element there where I was like feeling bad for my non-gamer friends who were desperately trying to find a Switch just to kind of fill, like you said, fill that time, fill that gap in their daily structure. Um, it was rough to witness that while I had access to the game alongside a group of friends who were playing with me. It felt like a club that they wanted to be a part of that they couldn't quite get into.
Yeah, I can understand that. I didn't have many people in my life who couldn't find one. But I know my mom struggled to get one. I mean, my mom, like I know y'all don't know my mom, but she is not a gamer, like not even close. Um, my dad bought a Switch, and you know, I started seeing my family like in Animal Crossing more than I had seen them in real life, like just visiting their islands. And I would send my mom little letters in the game and she'd send stuff back. And it became this interesting kind of lifeline between me and the people I felt so separated from during that time. And I think that kind of wholesome like interaction that you had with people in that game is what drove those sales because people just kind of there's something special about a game that literally connects you to the people you care most about. And there are very few games that really focus on that. I play games with my best friend every week, and we're usually just on PSN, uh, playing Helldivers, shooting things, killing things. Like it's nice to connect with him, but it's not the same as like, you know, starting up a game and finding like a heartfelt note from someone who actually cares about you in that game.
It was as close to an interpersonal connection you could get through digital space, um, that you could at the time. Um, yeah, it's Animal Crossing: New Horizons is an interesting one. It it's very doubtful that something like that will ever happen again, just because of the circumstances surrounding its release. Um, I wonder what they'll do for the next Animal Crossing. I don't think it'll quite have the effect it did here, just because of the nature of the world at the time. But I am curious how many of those people who bought in who had never played before will return.
I find myself asking the same question because I know that to this day, albeit not often, my mom will still dust off her Switch, like quite literally, and she'll boot up Animal Crossing and play for a little bit. And then she'll put it down. It might be 6 months, a year before she comes back again. But my mom over the years, like she connects with some games on a very personal level. I remember when the first time I saw her post pandemic and she had her Switch and she handed it to me and she asked me if Oregon Trail was on the Switch. And I didn't know the answer to that. So
Wow.
I had to look it up. And I was like, you know what, Mom? It is. And she was like, oh my gosh, how do I get it? Do I go to GameStop? And I was like, there's no way this is at GameStop. um, so I bought it for her on the eShop and downloaded it to her Switch. And she she played it, and when she was playing it, she's like, I just love having this game. It's something I like to come back to. And, I imagine that years down the road, a lot of people will have that with Animal Crossing. They might not go out and get the new Animal Crossing right when it releases, but they'll realize one has come out, and they'll want to go seek it out. They'll be like, "Oh man, I remember how much I loved that one in 2020. Let me go pick up this new one and see if it still feels good to play." And I think that that's what we're going to see, is that Nintendo may not have crafted an audience that's going to rush towards every release the same way they do a Zelda or a Pokemon or a Mario. But they've more than likely created an incredibly long tail on all future Animal Crossing games.
Yeah, I think the next Animal Crossing is going to be a very interesting thing for Nintendo and just for the world at large. I know social media had a lot to do with it during the pandemic as well, because you got nothing to do. What else are you gonna do? You're gonna be on social media. Oh, these people are playing this game I've never seen before. It looks really cute. Playing with friends. Um, so I think some of those people will catch glimpses, like you said, if that there's a new Animal Crossing out and be like, oh, I should play that. I played like 27 hours of that last one or something. Um, and I hope they do come back. Animal Crossing is something that I think extends beyond just gamers, for lack of a better term. Um, and it'd be nice to have something that kind of unifies the world in a way that New Horizons did, even if for a brief time.
Yeah, it captured the collective attention of everybody. Like, people who don't game played Animal Crossing. And I think that it would be nice to have that kind of collective experience, because my favorite thing about games, why I'm doing this, why I'm on a podcast about Nintendo, is that I'm so enthusiastic about sharing my love of video games with others. And I don't care who you are. Like, if you want to hear about games, I'm willing to talk to you about them. And that is something that for that brief moment in 2020, we had that. Like, everybody wanted to know something about this one game.
Yeah, and I think that's a good place for us to wrap up. Steve, can you tell people how they can be part of our winner's circle?
Absolutely. If you'd like to support us and get episodes a day early, you can head over to patreon.com/gvgaming, where for as little as $5 a month, you can join our winner's circle. Like I said earlier, that gives you access to early episodes of The Week in Nintendo on Patreon. It also gives you a host of other benefits. You can check out our live recordings of discussions and stuff like that. And it's the easiest way to get into our Discord, where we have an exclusive Winner's Circle community that you can join.
Well, make sure you all do that. Let us know what you've been playing as well. Please leave a rating on our podcast. Give us 5 stars if you would. That would mean a lot to us. And until then, we'll see you next week. Keep the games good and the vibes greater. Bye now.
Bye.